Today we're going to look at how you can get typed end-to-end web service API clients in Python with workflow examples using PyCharm, VSCode and Jupyter Notebooks. Over the last 10 years, Python's popularity has climbed dramatically to now being one of the most popular and highly used programming languages in the world. With its strengths in mature libraries in popular topics such as AI, data science, and computer vision, it has become a powerful dynamic language with some impressive tooling. Python's dynamic nature is a strength that enables some amazing capabilities, but it does have its trade-offs. One of the disadvantages of a dynamic language is it can be easy to end up with bags of data of unknown shape or type, making it harder to read and architect your codebase. Since Python 3.5, the language has supported type hints, which is a way to annotate type information into your Python code and have the advantages that come with the additional metadata about your application. With type hints, you can catch type-related errors early, have better readability, make it easier to maintain clean architecture, and take advantage of IDE tooling to make building and maintaining your codebase easier over time. However, one of the biggest downsides of type hints is, well, you must manually put type hints everywhere in your code. This can be a lot of work and hard to justify, especially for smaller isolated scripts or notebooks. Working with external data, you must read into what the data structure looks like, types involved, and you end up modeling this type information in your head and baking in assumptions about the structure of the data into your dynamic code as you go. This can make your source code harder to reason about and read for other developers or even your future self if you need to come back to the code to modify or maintain it. Types can express concisely the schema of the data you're working with, but if you need to create that schema yourself every time you interact with a new web service endpoint, it can get somewhat tedious pretty quickly. So you're left with a choice of either leaving off the types and missing out on all the advantages listed above, or put in the work each time you interact with a new web service API. To improve this situation and get the best of both worlds, ServiceStack now has Python support for a workflow feature called Add ServiceStack Reference that gives you the fully typed annotated code for all data structures related to your integration. ServiceStack's message-centric design means the server already has the data transfer object or DTOs modeled with all the type information your Python client needs for the related type hints to be generated on demand. Let's have a look at how this works by building a small program in Python to visualize daily vaccination rates in the US. We have a web service that pulls public data from GitHub and stores it in a database ready for retrieval. The query response to the endpoint has already modeled the type info for this data, and so the ServiceStack server can generate the required Python code to be used in our client project. To make this process easier, we have several tools to help you import this code and start using it straight away. For PyCharm, we have a ServiceStack plugin that can install from the plugin marketplace. Once installed, you can right-click on a directory in your project, select New, and use Add ServiceStack Reference. In the dialog, specify the base URL of your ServiceStack host and a file name and click OK. This will import the request and response DTO related code, as well as install any related dependencies straight into your Python environment. From there, you can use from DTO's import star and use the JSON ServiceStack client from the ServiceStack Python client library to connect to the ServiceStack host and make a request using one of the request DTOs. In this example, we'll use the request DTO query vaccination rates and specify the location property and populate it with Arizona. Looking at the request DTO, we can see it uses the iReturn type of query response vaccination data as the response type. This tells us the structure of the response, and we can use this and add it straight to our response as the type hint. I didn't need to leave the IDE or infer the type information from examples of the response, as the schema is right here in my IDE in the request and response types generated by the server. To make services easier to explore, ServiceStack also hosts a free tool called Instant Client Apps at apps.servicestack.net. This app lets you explore any ServiceStack hosted services and generates full working projects in 9 different supported languages. Here we can see example code for using the vaccination rate service, showing me exactly how to use the client in my own project. You can even run the code there and preview the results from the client call on the right-hand side. We can also explore the different API calls this server supports. In this case, we can use the getLocations API to get the full list of known locations to filter by. Going back to our project and running it, we can see that we now have the data from the service, so let's move on to visualizing it. To do this, we'll want to get our data into a pandas data frame and then plot it using matplotlib. First, we'll need to install those two libraries into our environment. Then, using pandas, load our vaccination data results variable into a data frame and plot the date and daily vaccination columns. We know that these are valid columns as we can see these defined in our results type, which we loaded a list of into the pandas data frame. Apply some auto-formatting for our date x-axis and call plot.show. When working in PyCharm Professional, we can use scientific mode, which will allow us to view the data in the data frames while debugging, as well as show us the output of our plots as we iterate and make changes. We can quickly change the location filter to Alabama and see the results from that location. If you're working on both the .NET Server Stack service implementation and the Python client and change your server DTOs, you can update your Python client DTOs right from PyCharm. Looking at our dtos.py generated code, you'll see a commented out section at the top called Options. This allows you to change the output of the generated code from the server and remember those settings each time you update those DTOs. To change these options, remove the hash comment symbol from the front of each option and populate the value after the colon on the right-hand side. Save the file and either right-click Update ServiceStack Reference or use the lightbulb menu. This will pull the newly generated code from the server listed under the base URL. ServiceStack also has the cross-platform .NET tool X, which can be used to perform the same function as the plugin in PyCharm, but from the command line. This works well if you're using a minimal editor like VSCode. As an example, let's recreate our script in VSCode and use the X tool to import the generated DTOs. First, we'll create a new directory and new main.py in VSCode. Copying our script from PyCharm, we'll need to install pandas, matplotlib, and the ServiceStack Python client into our new virtual environment. We will also need to install the X tool. This can be done using the command .NET tool install -gx. Once the Python dependencies are installed into the virtual environment, we can run xpython and then the base URL of our hosted ServiceStack services to generate our dtos.py file. Now we have everything ready to run our script, let's place a debug breakpoint in the last print statement in our main.py file. As we can see, the same visualization we had in PyCharm pops up via matplotlib. We can also easily run a similar example in a Google Colab notebook. For this example, we could use the X tool to run the command xjupyter, the address of the ServiceStack host, and optionally a request DTO name. This will generate a notebook file that you can run on your local or hosted Jupyter Notebook server, but we can actually do this in an easier way. Opening Instant Client Apps again, we can see at the bottom right we can save the generated notebook straight into your Google Drive for use in Google Colab. Once saved, open in Google Colab and run the first cell. This will install the ServiceStack Python client library, import your DTO code, and initialize a JSON service client with the specific ServiceStack host address. It will then generate some example data tables to show the data from the services. Create a new cell and paste in the code from our example application, and we can see the same visuals in our Google Colab notebook. Since our DTOs are simple objects, we can see it works wherever you happen to be running your Python. Having the additional type hints for free takes the guesswork out of what your data looks like and lets you focus on building your solution rather than annotating type information you've already done once on the server. Add ServiceStack Reference works across 9 languages and gives teams working across multiple languages a consistent experience when building clients. Whether it be a Dart or Swift iOS app, a Java or Kotlin Android utility, or a Python library or script, having the known type information by default lets you avoid repeating yourself between server and client. That's it for this video. I hope you found it useful, and thanks for watching.